In a turbulent time in the history of Israel, the kingdom was under the rule of King Ahab, a monarch whose administration would be remembered both for his influence and his shadow. Ahab, married to Queen Jezebel, brought an era of great idolatry and corruption to the kingdom, diverting the people's hearts to false gods and unjust practices. The land, once blessed, now faced scarcity and desolation, reflecting the disconnection between the people and their true God. It was in this setting of spiritual and moral decay that Elijah emerged, an unexpected and powerful figure. Elijah did not come from a known prophetic lineage, nor was he from one of Israel's influential tribes. His sudden appearance in the pages of biblical history marked the beginning of a profound transformation. God, observing his people's deviation, chose Elijah to be a beacon of hope and righteousness amid the darkness surrounding the kingdom. Elijah's calling was not an ordinary event. Imagine an ordinary man living a simple life when suddenly he feels a divine presence calling him to a mission of immense importance. Elijah, moved by a greater force, promptly responds to God's call. He is designated to be the prophet who would confront idolatry and injustice, directly challenging the status quo established by Ahab and Jezebel. Elijah's mission was not just a spiritual task but also an act of courage in the face of an oppressive government and a society rooted in corrupt practices. He knew his journey would be filled with challenges, resistance, and even persecution. However, Elijah's zeal for God and his determination to restore true worship propelled him forward, regardless of the adversities. Upon accepting his role as prophet, Elijah began to stand out as a voice of truth in a sea of falsehood. His presence was like a breath of fresh air amid the oppressive heat of idolatry and corruption. With firm words and bold actions, he challenged the powerful, advocating for justice and fidelity to God. Every step Elijah took was guided by an unwavering conviction that the people of Israel needed to return to the path of righteousness. Elijah's calling as a prophet marked the beginning of an era of confrontations and miracles, where God's authority would be demonstrated unmistakably. His journey was just beginning, but from the very first moment, it was clear that Elijah would not be an ordinary prophet. He would be a spiritual leader who would change the destiny of a nation, reminding everyone of the importance of keeping their hearts and minds focused on the true God. Elijah's calling as a prophet was not only the start of his personal journey, but also the spiritual awakening of a dormant nation. Amid a reign marked by oppression and idolatry, Elijah emerged as a symbol of resistance and fidelity to God. His story is a testament to the power of faith and the courage needed to defend the truth, even when everything around seems lost. As we follow Elijah's path, we are inspired to reflect on our own commitment to what is just and true, reminding us that even in the darkest times, the light of faith can illuminate the way. If you feel motivated and inspired by this content, make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss more videos like this. We will bring a series of content with biblical teachings and inspiring stories that motivate us to continue and not give up. Let us proceed with the story. After being called by God to be a prophet in a time of great spiritual and moral turbulence in Israel, Elijah knew his mission would require facing powerful adversaries. King Ahab, married to Queen Jezebel, had led the kingdom down a path of idolatry, promoting the worship of Baal and suppressing true faith in Yahweh. Jezebel's influence in the royal court was profound, using her position to consolidate corrupt and unjust practices that eroded the integrity of the people of Israel. Ahab's reign was marked by political alliances that favored the worship of foreign gods, especially Baal, a deity associated with fertility and storms, widely worshipped in neighboring nations. Jezebel, a Phoenician princess, brought not only her culture but also her religious beliefs, imposing them on the people of Israel. She built shrines dedicated to Baal and persecuted the prophets of Yahweh, seeking to eliminate any trace of true divine worship. Justice in the kingdom also suffered under their rule. Jezebel used her influence to manipulate judgments, ensuring that those who opposed her reign or the worship of Baal were silenced. Corruption took root in governmental institutions, creating an environment where truth and righteousness were often sacrificed for power and convenience. Elijah, recognizing the extent of the spiritual and moral decay, could not remain silent. With a heart heavy from seeing a people turned away from God, he decided to confront King Ahab and Queen Jezebel directly. This act of courage was not just a political challenge but a declaration of unwavering fidelity to Yahweh. The moment of confrontation was carefully planned by God. Elijah knew that to challenge the corrupt leadership, he needed a platform that clearly demonstrated God's supremacy over Baal. Thus, he proposed a challenge that would be remembered for generations, a contest of prophecies on Mount Carmel, where God and Baal would compete to prove who was the true God of Israel. Elijah gathered 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Yahweh, organizing them into two distinct groups. He led them to Mount Carmel, an elevated location that offered a comprehensive view of the landscape, symbolizing the clarity and visibility of the truth he sought to establish. The established challenge was simple: each group would choose an altar and a sacrifice, but without lighting the fire. The true God would respond by sending fire from heaven to consume the sacrifice, thus demonstrating his supremacy. To ensure the impartiality of the challenge, Elijah proposed a vow of silence among the participants, with the condition that only the prophets of each group would witness their own divine invocation. The climax of the confrontation was near, and the tension was palpable as everyone awaited the outcome. The prophets of Baal went first. They erected their altars on Mount Carmel, decorating them with wood, stones, and even colorful ornaments, in an attempt to attract their god's attention. They danced, shouted, and even self-mutilated in hopes of appealing to Baal. However, despite their fervent efforts, no divine response came. The altar remained cold and inert, causing frustration and despair among the prophets of Baal. Then it was Elijah's turn, and that of the prophets of Yahweh. Elijah rebuilt the altar of Yahweh that had previously been destroyed, adding 12 stones to represent the tribes of Israel, symbolizing the unity of the kingdom under the true God. He cut the sacrifice into pieces and placed it on the altar, carefully adding wood around it. To heighten the dramatic effect of the miracle, Elijah ordered that water be poured over the sacrifice and the altar, filling it to the brim. 3 times, he did this, soaking everything until the wood was completely drenched. With the altar prepared and the water filling the area, Elijah stood up and fervently called out to God, "Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, you are God in heaven and God on earth. Show us now that you are God in heaven or on earth. Answer us, Lord, so that we may know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning our hearts back again." In a spectacular instant, fire descended from heaven, consuming the sacrifice entirely, leaving nothing behind. The flames lit up Mount Carmel, dispelling any shadow of doubt about Yahweh's authority. The witnesses were amazed and stood in reverent silence before the displayed divine power. The victory on Mount Carmel was a decisive blow against the idolatry promoted by Ahab and Jezebel. The prophets of Baal, witnessing Yahweh's display of power, fell prostrate, acknowledging God's true supremacy. Elijah then ordered their capture and execution, eliminating the main defenders of idolatry in the kingdom. With the disastrous defeat of the prophets of Baal, the people of Israel were faced with the reality of their choice: follow the true God or continue in idolatrous practices. This event marked the beginning of significant spiritual renewal, where true worship of Yahweh began to be restored. Elijah's brave confrontation did not go unnoticed by the corrupt leaders. Queen Jezebel, furious at the public humiliation of her prophets, vowed revenge against Elijah. She promised that her lineage would face the same death as the prophets of Baal. This vow put Elijah in great danger, forcing him to flee and seek refuge in isolated places, such as the desert, where he would continue his prophetic mission with renewed determination. Elijah's confrontation with King Ahab and Queen Jezebel is a powerful testimony of courage and fidelity to God in the face of oppression and corruption. Elijah demonstrated that even when confronted with powerful forces and overwhelming adversities, divine truth and justice prevail. His story inspires all of us to defend what is right, even when it means facing great challenges. Elijah's confrontation with King Ahab and Queen Jezebel on Mount Carmel is one of the Bible's most emblematic stories, exemplifying the struggle between true faith and idolatry, between justice and corruption. Elijah, with his courage and unwavering fidelity, showed the people of Israel the importance of remaining faithful to God, even when it means challenging established power structures. This narrative not only highlights the grandeur of divine miracles, but also underscores the need for strong spiritual leadership and the willingness to face adversities in the name of truth. Elijah's story invites us to reflect on our own lives, encouraging us to defend what we believe in and to seek justice and righteousness, regardless of the circumstances. As we follow Elijah's journey, we are reminded that even in times of darkness and despair, the light of divine truth can shine brightly, guiding us toward redemption and spiritual renewal. After the dramatic confrontation on Mount Carmel, where Elijah demonstrated God's supremacy over Baal, the prophet knew his mission was far from over. The victory had brought a brief wave of hope and spiritual renewal to the people of Israel, but much still needed to be done to restore true worship and justice in the kingdom. It was at this crucial moment that God instructed Elijah to make an announcement that would change the nation's destiny: the declaration of a prolonged drought over the land. Elijah, still impacted by the recent victory, withdrew to a quiet place where he could clearly hear God's voice. Amid the solitude of the desert, far from Jezebel's oppression and the city's temptations, he sought to renew his connection with the Creator. There, enveloped by silence and the vastness of nature, God spoke to Elijah's heart. "Elijah, my faithful servant, the people of Israel have turned back to me, but there is still much repentance to be done. Idolatry and injustice remain rooted in their hearts. Therefore, I bring a message of judgment and hope. You will announce a prolonged drought over the land. This will be a time of purification, allowing the people to reflect on their choices and return to the path of righteousness." With the clarity of the divine mission, Elijah knew his announcement would not be easily received. The drought would be a powerful sign of God's disapproval, but also a call to reflection and change. He returned to Israel bearing the weight of this responsibility, aware that he would face resistance from both King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, who did not want to admit their wrong paths. Before making the announcement, Elijah sought a moment of prayer and meditation, strengthening his faith and asking for divine guidance to convey the message with wisdom and compassion. He knew the drought would not be merely a punishment, but an opportunity for the people to turn back to God. Elijah gathered the leaders and the people of Israel in a large hall in the royal palace. The atmosphere was tense, with whispers of uncertainty and fear passing among those present. The prophet, with an imposing presence and eyes full of determination, stood up to speak. "People of Israel, hear the word of the Lord. You have turned away from the path of truth, worshipping false gods and living in injustice. Therefore, the Lord has decreed that the land will face a prolonged drought. There will be no rain or dew until you repent and return to serving me with all your heart." Elijah's words elicited a mix of reactions. Some hearts were saddened and felt the weight of the message, recognizing the truth in the prophet's words. Others, influenced by Jezebel and the prophets of Baal, rejected the message, accusing Elijah of being a destroyer and bringing ruin to the kingdom. Tension grew with each passing second, with heated debates and even veiled threats directed at Elijah. After the announcement, the drought began to manifest visibly. The crops withered under the relentless sun, rivers dried up, and wells that were once abundant became scarce and insufficient for the people. The land that once thrived with life was now paralyzed by the lack of water, symbolizing the absence of divine blessing. The people began to feel the gravity of the situation, facing the reality that their actions had direct consequences on the nation's well-being. 3.5 years passed, a symbolic period of purification and repentance. During this time, Elijah played a fundamental role, guiding the people back to the path of righteousness. He performed miracles that demonstrated God's ongoing provision, such as multiplying flour and oil for the widow of Zarephath, and the miracle of multiplying water at a certain moment, reminding the people that even in times of scarcity, faith in God brings provision and hope. The drought brought moments of despair to many. Families faced hunger and thirst, and trust in King Ahab and Queen Jezebel began to waver. However, it was also a time of introspection and spiritual renewal. Prayers became more frequent, and the community began to recognize the need to return to Yahweh's teachings. Elijah, even facing personal challenges and the constant threat from Jezebel, remained steadfast in his mission. His spiritual leadership inspired many to renew their commitment to God, establishing a solid foundation for the kingdom's transformation. At the end of the 3.5 years, Elijah felt that the time of purification was nearing its end. The people had shown clear signs of repentance and a renewal of their commitment to true worship of God. The drought was about to be reversed, symbolizing the restoration of divine blessing over the land. With the conclusion of this period, rain finally returned, bringing relief and renewal to the land and the people's hearts. The drought, which had been a sign of judgment, transformed into a testimony of God's mercy and faithfulness in hearing and responding to his people's sincere repentance. Elijah's announcement of the drought was a decisive moment in Israel's history, marking the beginning of a period of purification and spiritual renewal. Through this challenging experience, the people were led to reflect on their choices and reaffirm their commitment to God. Elijah, as a courageous and faithful leader, played a crucial role in this process, demonstrating that even in times of adversity, faith and obedience to God can bring hope and transformation. The story of the Drought Announcement teaches us about the importance of collective responsibility, spiritual leadership, and trust in God during times of crisis. It reminds us that even in the face of great challenges, there is always an opportunity for renewal and to strengthen our connection with the divine. As we follow Elijah's journey, we are inspired to reflect on our own lives and seek righteousness and truth in all circumstances. Do you feel any similarity between the moment you are living and the story told? Do you feel you are experiencing something similar? Tell us how you feel. If you need a prayer or help, share a story of overcoming to inspire us and give us strength not to give up. Comment if you want to help someone or need help. The drought decreed by God over the land of Israel was not merely an absence of rain. It was a time of testing, reflection, and paradoxically, a manifestation of divine power through miracles that would sustain Elijah and the few faithful who remained loyal to Yahweh. During these 3.5 years of arid scarcity, God's presence was felt in surprising ways, revealing his provision and care even in the darkest moments. At the beginning of the drought, the land that once flourished now appeared barren and lifeless. The crops withered under the scorching sun, rivers dried up, and wells, once abundant, became rare and insufficient for the people. Elijah, aware of the devastating impact the drought would have on the nation, knew he needed to fully trust in God for his own survival and the continuation of his prophetic mission. Then God commanded Elijah to retreat to the brook Chariot, where he would be under the protection of divinely provided natural forces. There, in the midst of the desert, Elijah was fed by ravens sent by God. Every morning and every afternoon, these majestic birds brought bread and meat, sustaining the prophet throughout the drought. Imagine the scene: a solitary man, enveloped in the desolate vastness of the desert, only accompanied by the gentle sound of the brook's waters and the fluttering wings of the ravens. This continuous provision was not just a miracle of physical sustenance, but also a symbol of God's faithfulness in times of need. Elijah, in his solitude, found comfort and strength in the constant presence of these winged messengers, reminding him that he was not alone in his mission. After a period of isolation and divine provision through the ravens, Elijah received new instructions from God to travel to Zarephath, a small Philistine town, where he would find a widow who, despite her own scarcity, still maintained her faith in Yahweh. The journey to Zarephath was not simple. Elijah walked for days, facing the scorching heat and desert aridity, but guided by the certainty that God would lead him. Upon arriving in the city, he found the widow gathered with her son, both struggling to survive amid the severe crisis. The widow of Zarephath was a woman of faith and resilience. Despite the hardships, she did not lose hope and continued to honor God in her heart. When Elijah arrived at her door, she was preparing the last portion of flour and oil she possessed, intended to make a meal for herself and her son before succumbing to hunger. With a heavy heart, the widow received Elijah and listened to his message. He revealed that God had sent him to provide the necessary sustenance during the drought. Despite the lack of resources, she showed unwavering faith by obeying the prophet's instruction. "Bring me a little flour and oil," said Elijah. "For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." The widow, though unsure how she could support herself and her son with such little provision, decided to trust Elijah's words. She tore her last piece of bread and began to make dough with the little flour and oil she had, offering it to the prophet. At that moment, a miracle occurred. The flour and oil began to multiply, filling the widow's house in Zarephath with abundant supplies. Day after day, the divine provision continued, ensuring that they never lacked food throughout the drought's duration. This miracle not only sustained the widow and her son, but also served as a powerful testimony to God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises. The miracles performed by Elijah during the drought held deep and multifaceted meaning. The feeding by ravens symbolized divine provision even in the most desperate situations, while the multiplication of flour and oil in the widow's house in Zarephath represented the abundance that God can bring in times of need, surpassing human expectations. These miracles also reinforced the central message of Elijah's mission. Fidelity to God and trust in his provision are essential for spiritual and physical survival. Through these divine actions, Elijah demonstrated that true faith transcends circumstances and that God is always present to support those who seek him sincerely. Despite the impressive miracles, the drought and the divine signs of provision also generated resistance and skepticism among some segments of the population. Jezebel and the prophets of Baal, already wary of Elijah's growing influence, saw his miracles as a direct threat to their power and authority. They intensified their efforts to discredit the prophet, spreading rumors and creating obstacles to undermine his reputation. However, Elijah remained steadfast in his faith and mission. He understood that the miracles were not just to sustain himself and the faithful physically, but also to strengthen the people's faith and challenge the dominant idolatry. His resilience in the face of adversity inspired those who still believed in true worship of Yahweh, reinforcing the importance of maintaining fidelity even amidst opposition. Throughout the drought, many who were previously hesitant or discouraged began to see God's hand acting tangibly in their lives. Elijah's constant provision and miracles served as powerful reminders of God's faithfulness and the importance of returning to the true path of righteousness. Stories of resilience and faith spread across the land, encouraging others to abandon idolatry and injustice and to seek spiritual renewal. The community began to unite around Elijah's teachings, forming a solid foundation for Israel's spiritual transformation. The miracles performed by Elijah during the drought were not only spectacular demonstrations of God's power, but also profound lessons on faith, trust, and divine provision. Through the feeding by ravens and the multiplication of flour and oil, Elijah showed the people of Israel that even in the most difficult times, God is present to sustain and guide those who seek Him sincerely. These events not only physically sustained Elijah and the faithful, but also spiritually strengthened the nation, paving the way for the renewal and restoration of true worship of Yahweh. The story of the miracles during Elijah's drought continues to inspire generations, reminding us of the importance of trusting in God and maintaining unwavering faith, even in the face of the greatest adversities. The story of the challenge on Mount Carmel is one of the most emblematic and dramatic moments in biblical narratives, highlighting Elijah's unwavering faith and the powerful demonstration of God's supremacy. This event not only changed the course of Israel's history, but also left an indelible mark on the understanding of true worship and devotion to God. After the miracles that sustained Elijah during the drought, the tension in the kingdom of Israel reached its peak. King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, along with the 450 prophets of Baal, kept the people away from Yahweh, promoting idolatry and injustice. Jezebel's influence was suffocating, suppressing true prophets and consolidating the worship of Baal as the religious norm. The kingdom was steeped in moral and spiritual corruption, and the people suffered the consequences of this disobedience. Elijah, determined to restore true faith in Yahweh, knew that a courageous act and a clear demonstration of God's supremacy were necessary to transform the people's hearts. Thus, the idea of a public challenge emerged, a duel of faith that would reveal who truly held divine power and authority. Elijah chose Mount Carmel, an elevated and significant location, as the stage for this decisive confrontation. This mountain not only offered a panoramic view of the region, but also symbolized the pursuit of clarity and truth amid the darkness of idolatry. He gathered the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Yahweh, organizing them into two distinct groups. Choosing Mount Carmel was strategic, as its altitude allowed the divine manifestation to be visible to all present and to neighboring villages. Elijah's proposed challenge was simple yet forceful. Each group should choose an altar and a sacrifice, but without lighting the fire. The true God would respond by sending fire from heaven to consume the sacrifice, demonstrating His true authority and power. This proposal aimed to eliminate any doubt about who was the true God of Israel. As participants and spectators gathered on Mount Carmel, the atmosphere was charged with tension and expectation. The sky was clear, reflecting the importance and solemnity of the event. The prophets of Baal, confident in their deity, erected their altars with elaborate ornaments, trying to attract their god's attention through fervent dances, shouts, and even self-sacrifice rituals, hoping Baal would respond to their invocations. Meanwhile, Elijah, accompanied by the 400 prophets of Yahweh, prepared calmly and determinedly. He instructed his group to rebuild the altar of Yahweh that had been previously destroyed, reinforcing his faith in the restoration of true worship. Every detail of the altar was carefully planned to reflect reverence and devotion to God. The prophets of Baal began the challenge first. They called out to Baal with all their might, dancing around the altar, seething with anger and desperation, trying to provoke a response from their God. They performed elaborate rituals, poured water over the sacrifice and the altar, hoping Baal would manifest through divine fire. 4 hours, nothing happened. Baal's altar remained inert, and the prophets began to feel frustration and despair. The water kept flowing, symbolizing Baal's absence. The tense atmosphere turned to desperation as no sign of fire appeared, despite the prophets' exhaustive efforts. With the prophets of Baal defeated, Elijah took the floor. He not only challenged idolatry but also strengthened the faith of the prophets of Yahweh, reminding them of the importance of remaining steadfast in true worship of God. His presence was serene and confident, contrasting with the frustration and despair of the prophets of Baal. Elijah then presented his own altar, already rebuilt, and placed a sacrifice upon it. With the same instruction to the prophets of Yahweh not to light the fire, he prayed to God fervently, "Lord God of Abraham, Isaac and Israel, you are God in heaven and God on earth. Show us now that you are God in heaven or on earth. Answer us, Lord, so that we may know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning our hearts back again." In a spectacular instant, fire descended from heaven, consuming the sacrifice entirely, leaving nothing behind. The intense flames blazed under the blue sky, illuminating Mount Carmel and dispelling any shadow of doubt about Yahweh's authority. The fire not only consumed the sacrifice but also the wood, stones, and even the water, demonstrating that nothing could hinder the divine manifestation. The people of Israel, witnessing this undeniable miracle, fell to their knees in reverence, recognizing Yahweh's supremacy over Baal. God's presence was evident and unquestionable, breaking the chains of doubt and idolatry that had kept the kingdom away from true faith. Elijah then ordered the prophets of Baal to be captured and executed, eliminating the main defenders of idolatry in the kingdom. This action not only consolidated Yahweh's victory, but also symbolized the spiritual and moral purification the people of Israel needed to return to the path of righteousness. The challenge on Mount Carmel had a profound and lasting impact on Israel. It not only restored faith in Yahweh, but also dismantled the pernicious influence of Baal and Jezebel in the kingdom. Elijah's victory inspired the people to renew their commitment to God, promoting an era of spiritual renewal and justice. Furthermore, this event strengthened Elijah's position as a powerful and respected spiritual leader, demonstrating that true faith and devotion to God can overcome the most oppressive and corrupt forces. The story of the challenge on Mount Carmel remains an inspiring testimony to the importance of courage, unwavering faith, and fidelity to God, even in the face of great adversities. The challenge on Mount Carmel is a story of faith, courage, and the undeniable victory of God over idolatry and corruption. Elijah, with his unshakable trust in Yahweh, demonstrated that true worship is powerful and transformative, capable of overcoming the most oppressive forces and bringing spiritual renewal to a nation. This event not only restored faith in Israel, but also served as an eternal reminder of the importance of remaining faithful to God, regardless of the adversities faced. As we reflect on this story, we are inspired to cultivate genuine faith and to face challenges with the same determination and trust in God that Elijah demonstrated. The challenge on Mount Carmel teaches us that even in the darkest moments, the light of truth and faith can prevail, bringing hope and transformation to all who embrace it. Leave a like if you are enjoying this, so YouTube continues to recommend videos like this and helps us stay motivated to continue. We appreciate every second and may God bless you. After the spectacular challenge on Mount Carmel, where Elijah demonstrated God's supremacy over Baal, the nation of Israel was in a state of spiritual transformation. Elijah's victory not only restored faith in Yahweh, but also exposed the fragility and falsehood of worshipping Baal. However, to consolidate this victory and completely eliminate the influence of idolatry, Elijah knew that decisive actions were necessary. Thus, he ordered the execution of the prophets of Baal, an act that would deeply mark Israel's history and reaffirm divine authority over the nation. Elijah, aware of the ongoing threat that idolatry posed, understood that merely demonstrating power on Mount Carmel would not be sufficient to ensure Israel's spiritual renewal. He knew that the prophets of Baal, despite failing to invoke their God, still represented a pernicious influence that needed to be eradicated for true faith to flourish unimpeded. With this understanding, Elijah gathered the prophets of Yahweh and the loyal leaders to King Ahab, preparing for a firm and irrevocable action. In the grand hall of the royal palace, Elijah laid out his plan to the leaders and the prophets of Yahweh. He explained that to ensure God's complete victory over Baal, it was necessary to remove the prophets of Baal from Israeli society. This decision, though severe, was seen as a necessary step to purify the kingdom and restore true worship of Yahweh. The leaders, though apprehensive, recognized the wisdom and necessity of this action. The atmosphere was tense, but also filled with renewed hope. The people of Israel, still awestruck by Yahweh's power demonstrated on Mount Carmel, began to support Elijah's initiative, seeing it as an opportunity to finally break free from the oppression of idolatry. With Elijah's determination, the leaders ordered that all the prophets of Baal be summoned to the Kishon Valley, a location chosen for its neutrality and symbolism of renewal. The Kishon Valley, with its serene landscape and tranquil nature, contrasted with the turmoil and desolation that Baal had brought to the kingdom. The 450 prophets of Baal, enraged and humiliated by their defeat on Mount Carmel, were led to the valley under strict escort. The journey to the location was marked by murmurs of despair and fear, as the prophets knew they would face severe consequences for their loyalty to a false god. In the center of the Kishon Valley, Elijah positioned himself with the prophets of Yahweh and the kingdom's leaders. The atmosphere was thick with a mix of divine justice and sadness over the loss of a way of life that, though wrong, was part of the people's culture and beliefs. Elijah, with a firm and resolute voice, pronounced the sentence, "You prophets of Baal, today your lies and idolatry are exposed. You have deceived the people of Israel, turning them away from the true God. Therefore, by order of King Ahab and the Lord, you will be executed so that the land may be purified and true worship may flourish. The prophets of Baal, now stripped of their illusory power, fell to their knees, begging for mercy. But Elijah's determination was unshakable. With the leaders' approval and the people's support, the executions were carried out swiftly and decisively, eliminating the pernicious influence of Baal in the kingdom once and for all. The execution of the prophets of Baal was met with a mix of relief and sadness by the people of Israel. Many recognized the need for spiritual purification but also mourned the loss of human lives, even those who had strayed from true faith. However, most understood that this action was essential to ensure the restoration of justice and truth in the kingdom. Israel's leaders, strengthened by Elijah's victory, began implementing reforms that promoted the worship of Yahweh and social justice. Jezebel's influence, though still present, began to wane in the face of the people's growing adherence to true faith. The execution of the prophets of Baal was not just a physical elimination of idolatry, but also a powerful reaffirmation of God's authority over Israel. Elijah, with his courage and determination, demonstrated that true faith and divine justice do not tolerate corruption and idolatry. This act served as a constant reminder to the people of Israel that fidelity to Yahweh would bring prosperity and peace, while disobedience and idolatry would result in destruction and chaos. Elijah's courage and determination to purify the kingdom of Israel left a lasting legacy. His story became a symbol of unwavering faith and the importance of defending truth, even in the face of great challenges. The elimination of the prophets of Baal marked the beginning of an era of spiritual renewal and justice in Israel, where true worship of Yahweh began to flourish once again. Elijah continued his prophetic mission, facing new challenges and inspiring future generations to remain faithful to God. His story is remembered as a testimony to the importance of fighting for truth and trusting in divine providence, even in the most difficult moments. The death of the prophets of Baal, ordered by Elijah, was a crucial moment in Israel's history, symbolizing the victory of true faith over idolatry and corruption. This act of courage and determination not only purified the nation but also reaffirmed God's authority over the kingdom, establishing a solid foundation for spiritual renewal and social justice. Elijah's story teaches us about the importance of defending truth and faith, even in the face of great challenges and adversities. It reminds us that true worship of God requires courage, sacrifice, and an unwavering determination to follow His ways. As we reflect on this narrative, we are inspired to cultivate genuine faith and fight for justice and truth in our own lives, following Elijah's example as a beacon of light and righteousness amid darkness. And thus, the story of Elijah and the death of the prophets of Baal continues to resonate through the centuries, serving as a powerful testimony to God's faithfulness and the importance of remaining steadfast in faith, regardless of the circumstances. This event marked the beginning of a new era for Israel, where true worship of Yahweh began to flourish again, guiding the nation toward a future of hope and spiritual renewal. After the dramatic victory on Mount Carmel, where Elijah demonstrated God's supremacy over Baal, the prophet faced immediate and severe consequences. Queen Jezebel, enraged by the humiliation of her prophets, vowed revenge against Elijah. Fearing for his life and understanding the magnitude of his mission, Elijah made the difficult decision to flee to the desert. This period of isolation and persecution would be a profound test of his faith and resilience, culminating in a transformative encounter with God that would renew his prophetic mission. Jezebel's threat was real and constant. She was determined to eliminate Elijah to restore her influence and the worship of Baal in the kingdom. With watchful eyes and hardened hearts, Jezebel's messengers relentlessly pursued Elijah through the mountains and valleys of Israel. The growing tension made every shadow and every sound seem like possible signs of his imminent capture. Elijah, exhausted and burdened by the weight of his responsibilities, felt fear penetrate his heart. He knew his mission was not only to confront the prophets of Baal, but also to challenge the power structures that promoted idolatry and injustice. The constant threat from Jezebel made his journey even more lonely and arduous. With a heavy heart and a restless mind, Elijah set out for the desert, leaving behind the turmoil of the royal palace and the responsibility of leading the people of Israel. The desert, vast and inhospitable, represented both a physical and spiritual test. The extreme temperatures during the day and the biting cold at night, along with the scarcity of water and food, made survival a constant struggle. Elijah walked for days, crossing sand dunes and arid landscapes. Each step seemed more difficult than the last, and discouragement began to set in his spirit. The desert solitude mirrored his inner state, where doubts and fears threatened to shake his unwavering faith. The absence of God's visible presence left him vulnerable, and the weight of his responsibilities felt overwhelming. On a quiet afternoon, as the sun began to set and the mountain shadows stretched across the desolate land, Elijah felt utterly helpless. He settled beneath a twisted tree, unable to continue his journey. Despair took hold of his heart, and silent tears streamed down his face. "I have had enough," he murmured to himself. "Take my life, Lord, for I am no better than my ancestors." This sincere prayer reflected the depth of his anguish and the sense of failure he felt in the face of relentless challenges. Elijah, who had been a beacon of faith and courage, now found himself on the brink of despair. Just as Elijah was about to succumb to despair, God intervened in an unexpected and silent way. After sending an angel to provide food and water, restoring his physical strength, God sought Elijah out in the desert. The prophet, still shaken by his emotional experience, sat under the tree, lost in dark thoughts. God did not speak amidst storms or lightning. Instead, he was present in a gentle breeze that caressed Elijah's face. The breeze, almost imperceptible, brought a sense of calm and renewal. Elijah listened attentively, feeling the divine presence fill the air around him. "Get up, because you are with God," said a serene and comforting voice. These words penetrated deeply into his heart, dispelling the darkness of discouragement and replacing it with powerful spiritual renewal. Renewed by the divine presence, Elijah stood up with new determination. God gave him clear and specific instructions to continue his prophetic mission. He was to be a mentor to Elisha, a young disciple who would accompany him and continue his work after his departure. "Go to Jotan," God said to Elijah. "Wait there by the brook in the desert of Tob, near the Jordan." These instructions directed Elijah to a new phase of his journey, where he would find support and prepare the way for the next generation of spiritual leaders. As Elijah followed God's instructions, the desert landscape began to change. The sky, which had previously seemed hopeless, revealed vibrant colors of a rainbow. This natural spectacle symbolized God's promise not to abandon his servant, even in the darkest moments. Elijah, watching the rainbow, felt renewed hope and confidence. He understood that although he faced adversities and persecutions, God was always present, guiding and strengthening him to fulfill his mission. Finally, Elijah reached Jotan, where he found Elisha, a humble and dedicated young farmer. Recognizing Elijah's faith and courage, Elisha promptly agreed to follow the prophet, becoming his disciple and successor. Elijah spent the following days teaching Elisha about faith, courage, and the importance of remaining faithful to God, even in the face of great adversities. Together, they prepared for future challenges, strengthening Israel's spiritual foundation and ensuring the continuity of the divine mission. Elijah's flight to the desert and his encounter with God in the gentle breeze were crucial moments that shaped his trajectory as a prophet. This period of isolation and despair was transformed into an experience of spiritual renewal and strengthened faith. Through this journey, Elijah learned to depend even more on God, recognizing that true strength comes from unwavering trust in the Creator. His desert encounter not only saved his life but also paved the way for a new era of spiritual leadership in Israel. Elijah's legacy, reinforced by this transformative experience, continued to inspire future generations to remain steadfast in faith and to trust in divine provision, even in the most challenging moments. Elijah's story is filled with extraordinary moments that highlight his unwavering faith and his closeness to God. Among these moments, the ascension to heaven in a chariot of fire is perhaps the most impressive and symbolic, marking the end of his earthly journey and the beginning of an eternal legacy. This event not only underscores Elijah's importance as a prophet, but also symbolizes the continuation of his divine mission through the prophecy of his successor Elisha. After facing numerous challenges, confronting corrupt kings, performing miracles, and leading a spiritual renewal in Israel, Elijah was ready to conclude his earthly mission. His tireless dedication to God's truth and his courage in the face of oppression made him a revered and respected figure. However, Elijah's journey was about to take a supernatural turn, revealing the depth of his connection with the divine. In a tranquil setting, Elijah was traveling to Horeb, the mountain of God, accompanied only by his faithful disciple Elisha. The surrounding landscape was serene, with gentle hills and a light breeze whispering through the trees. The sun shone softly, reflecting the peace Elijah felt in his heart after fulfilling his mission on earth. Suddenly, the environment changed. A great cloud enveloped the area, and the sound of horses' hooves filled the air. From within the cloud, a chariot of fire appeared, bright and majestic, shining the beam of light that illuminated the mountain. Alongside the chariot, horses of fire emerged, their hooves pounding forcefully and emitting flames that danced around them. Elijah, with a look of reverence and surrender, was taken up into the chariot. He looked back, seeing Elisha watching in silence, his eyes reflecting a mix of admiration and sorrow. Before Elijah could utter a word, he was swiftly transported into heaven, disappearing in the blazing light of the chariot of fire. Elisha, witnessing his master's ascension, felt a surge of intense emotions. The physical loss of Elijah brought deep sadness, but the miraculous vision of his ascension reinforced the certainty that Elijah was being rewarded for his faithfulness and devotion. With tears in his eyes, Elisha realized that Elijah's mission had not ended but had been passed on to him, ensuring the continuity of the prophetic legacy. Elijah's ascension to heaven in a chariot of fire is an event rich with symbolism and meaning. Firstly, it highlights the close relationship between Elijah and God, demonstrating that he was a prophet of high esteem and importance. The absence of a physical death underscores the uniqueness of his calling and the divine grace bestowed upon him. Moreover, the chariot of fire symbolizes God's purity and power, representing the divine strength that sustained Elijah in his mission. Fire is often associated with God's presence in the Bible, symbolizing purification, power, and consecration. The chariot, in turn, symbolizes spiritual ascension and the elevation of the prophet to a higher state of service to God. Elijah's ascension did not mark the end of his influence, but rather the beginning of a lasting legacy. Before departing, Elijah passed his mantle to Elisha, symbolizing the transfer of his authority and prophetic responsibility. Elisha continued Elijah's work, performing similar miracles and facing challenges that preserved true faith in Israel. Elijah's impact endures through generations, serving as an example of unwavering faith, courage in the face of adversity, and dedication to divine truth. His ascension to heaven inspires believers to trust in God's providence and seek a deeper relationship with the divine, even amidst the greatest difficulties. Elijah's journey, from his prophetic calling to his celestial ascension, is a narrative rich in spiritual and moral lessons that resonate deeply with all of us, regardless of age. Elijah's story teaches us the importance of fervently defending God's truth and authority, even in the face of great challenges and adversities. His example of courage, faith, and dedication continues to inspire generations to remain steadfast in their faith, serving as a beacon of light in times of darkness and uncertainty. Elijah did not hesitate to confront King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, openly denouncing the worship of Baal and the injustice that permeated the kingdom of Israel. This courage did not arise from nowhere. It was fueled by a deep zeal for God and an unwavering conviction in the truth. Elijah teaches us that when we align ourselves with divine principles, we have the necessary strength to confront injustice and corruption, even when it means facing powerful adversaries. During the drought, Elijah faced moments of great discouragement and fear. Persecuted by Jezebel and living in adverse conditions in the desert, he could have succumbed to despair. However, his unwavering faith sustained him. When everything seemed lost, Elijah found spiritual renewal by reconnecting with God in a moment of silence and contemplation. This resilience teaches us that even in the most difficult circumstances, true faith can give us the strength to continue and overcome obstacles. Elijah dedicated his life to fulfilling the mission God entrusted to him, regardless of personal consequences. From the confrontation on Mount Carmel to his ascension to heaven, Elijah remained faithful to the divine call, demonstrating a dedication that transcends earthly difficulties. His life is a testimony that true dedication to God requires sacrifice, perseverance, and a continuous commitment to justice and truth. Elijah's encounter with God in the desert highlights the importance of spiritual renewal. Even when we feel tired and discouraged, it is essential to seek moments of introspection and connection with the divine to renew our faith and purpose. Elijah reminds us that through prayer, meditation, and trust in God, we can find the necessary renewal to continue our spiritual journey with vigor and determination. Elijah's ascension and the passing of his mantle to Elisha symbolize the continuity of the prophetic mission and the importance of preparing the next generation of spiritual leaders. Elijah not only fulfilled his mission, but also ensured that his legacy and divine teachings continued to guide the people of Israel. This teaches us about the importance of mentoring and inspiring others to remain steadfast in faith, ensuring that God's truth and justice endure through generations. Elijah's story is more than an ancient narrative. It is a source of inspiration and guidance for our contemporary lives. In a world where injustice, corruption, and idolatry still persist in various forms, Elijah's example encourages us to cultivate genuine faith and courage. His unwavering trust in God and dedication to divine truth serve as a powerful reminder that we too can be beacons of light and righteousness amid darkness. Thank you for watching this far. And don't forget to subscribe and activate the notification bell to see more content like this and stories of overcoming, motivation, and interesting topics. Until next time.